Hey everybody, Dr. Hagmeyer here, and today we're talking about the 10 most common causes behind brain fog and what you can do to eliminate brain fog naturally. Now maybe you're watching this and you're really not sure what's wrong with you, other than just feeling like you have lost your focus and concentration's a little off and you're feeling a little bit hazy or foggy. Perhaps you've noticed that over the last several weeks or months or even years, you have had an increased level of fatigue. You notice that your focus is off. You've noticed that you start a task and you never complete the task, okay? You come out of the grocery store and you forget where you parked your car. You notice that you're having a hard time finding the right words to say. You're losing enjoyment in life that you once had. You're not going to get a lot of help here from your general medical doctors, unfortunately. When you describe these symptoms, a lot of times they'll just tell you that you're getting old, or you might be asked if perhaps you're a little depressed. And the one thing I would say is be careful. Be very careful how you answer that last question, because if you say yes, that you have been a little sad or you've been a little bit depressed, you're going to be walking out that doctor's office with an antidepressant in your hand. And you might not need those, especially with some of the things that you're going to learn in today's video. Now, one thing you need to understand is that in order for your brain to keep up with the many needs and the many demands that your body places upon it, your brain needs a steady and properly fueled to be properly fueled, okay? So in other words, it needs to be continuously stimulated, and anything that disrupts that fuel delivery to the brain or anything that causes a hemispherical imbalance to the brain will cause brain fog, fatigue, loss of mental stamina, okay? Now, today we're going to be talking about the metabolic causes behind fuel delivery, and in a future video, I'll talk a whole lot more about these hemispherical imbalances that you need to be aware of and how certain exercises can actually stimulate your brain and be very, very powerful in terms of decreasing brain fog. But the important thing to understand here is, unlike muscles that can store fuel very easily and break down stored fat and turn it into energy, this is not so easy for your brain. And so your brain needs to have this constant and steady dietary source of fuel. Now, the fuel source your brain primarily depends on is oxygen and glucose, okay? So what are some of the things that can interfere with oxygen and glucose delivery to the brain? Well, there are 10 metabolic imbalances that I routinely check for patients that are describing brain fog or problems with concentration or memory or focus, okay? Number one is adrenal fatigue syndrome, okay? You might be hearing a lot more about this these days, but your adrenal glands control your stress response. They monitor inflammation in your body. They play a role in blood sugar. So this is one of the first areas that I often think of when someone describes brain fog or mental fogginess and fatigue. When your body's under stress, whether it's physical stress or mental stress or chemical stress or any other kind of stress that you might be experiencing in life, your adrenals kick in to stimulate the body's survival, that fight or flight mechanism, okay? Once the threat's over, the relaxation portion of your nervous system kicks in. This is your rest and digest, okay? That takes over. But what happens in the world that we live in is that we have this continuous stressor. And when this stressor continues to be present for prolonged periods of time, your adrenals continue to fire off cortisol and they deplete your body's DHEA levels. And that's very important because DHEA winds up becoming all the precursors to your male and female hormones. The other thing is that when this happens, everything seems to come to a grinding halt. Your body now goes into survival mode. It slows down to conserve energy. And if you look at the diagram that I have here, the two areas of importance for this video is the carbohydrate metabolism and the neurotissue health portion, okay? Underneath what you're going to notice, that orange portion, it says cellular energetics and glucose homeostasis. This is the connection between the adrenal gland function and fuel delivery to the cells and tissues of your body. When your blood sugar levels drop, okay, what happens is your adrenals mobilize stored fat. They basically take the stored fat, which is glycogen, and they convert it into glucose for energy, okay? Now, every cell in your body needs glucose in order to make ATP, which is energy. If you don't make ATP, cellular function again comes to a grinding halt, and one of the first organs to let you know that it's not happy is your brain. The other area that you see here is pointing to neurotissue health, okay? Here you can see that cortisol levels are also involved in things like mood and learning and sleep. And this is why it's so important that when you are experiencing brain fog, to check this system out, okay? Number two, the second cause of brain fog is dietary consumption of sugar, right? Nobody has a problem with sugar these days. Unfortunately, this is a huge problem for people that are experiencing brain fog. You know, we're all a bunch of sugar junkies. Okay, one of the most common problems that I see for many people who have gone on a gluten-free diet is the consumption of many of these so-called gluten-free foods. Okay, these gluten-free foods from rice protein or from sorghum or from potato and many of these other gluten-free flours break down to sugar very, very quickly. And that's not a good thing because it causes a surge of your body's blood sugar levels. Okay, so every spike or surge of blood sugar is also followed, of course, by a plummet, right? What goes up must come down. And it's this drop or this plummet in your blood sugar that really shuts your brain off, okay? Now, if you look at this picture here, you can see the roller coaster ride that most people are on. Take a look at some of the other common symptoms a person with low blood sugar has. Shaky, irritable, depressed, they can't think straight, they get headaches, they feel like their brain's inflamed, okay? Now, the longer this cycle of dysglycemia continues, the worse the brain fog is going to get on you. And this is why it's really important, and this is really, I should say, this is where we really start to upset all of the neurotransmitters of the brain. And this is also where depression and anxiety sets in. So one thing I want to mention here is that there are many things that can affect blood sugar, okay? The obvious is diet, but some of the other factors that influence blood sugar levels are going to be things like the adrenal glands, which we just talked about earlier, inflammation, infection, absorption, and then, of course, hormone imbalances, okay? Number 3 is artificial sweeteners, okay? Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't use sugar, right? I use artificial sweeteners like NutraSweet or Equal or Splenda or aspartame or sucralose, and there's probably many more that will continue to come out after this video has been done. But remember, anything that's artificial is probably not good for you, and it's something that you're going to want to eliminate. That's kind of like a golden rule of diet nutrition. Now, these sugars have all been linked to depression, they've been linked to migraines, they've been linked to irritability because of the neurotoxic effects and impacts that they have on special brain cells called glial cells and also specialized cells called astrocytes. Take aspartame, for example. When aspartame is broken down, it breaks down into phenylalanine, okay? It breaks down into aspartic acid, and then it also breaks down into methanol. Well, the problem here is that this excess of phenylalanine blocks the transport of amino acids to the brain, and when this happens, these amino acids can't get converted into things like dopamine and serotonin, okay? These are two very important neurotransmitters that are both involved in things like happiness and things like interest in life, okay? So dopamine obviously is also important for things like attention and motivation, joy, pleasure, goal-directed behavior, and serotonin, of course, is important for calmness and desire and emotional well-being, okay? But the point here is that these foods, including synthetic sugars, can influence the amino acid profiles that are designed, these amino acids, to get into the brain. So again, point being here is start looking at and reading food labels and stop using artificial sweeteners here. Number 5, heavy metals, okay? Heavy metals such as aluminum, lead, mercury, cadmium can all cause brain fog as well. Aluminum can be found in antacids, it can be found in antiperspirants, it can be found in soda, vaccines, and just so many other different areas. So again, identifying this as a factor and eliminating the exposure and perhaps detoxifying from these metals can also improve brain fog. Mercury obviously is a heavy metal and it's a potent neurotoxin that persists in our bodies. It can cause many neurological symptoms such as brain fog and memory loss. It can cause tingling in the feet and hands. Mercury, unfortunately, is present in our fish supply. It's really interesting. Consuming fish that contains mercury can cause mercury to accumulate in our bodies. The Environmental Protection Agency recommends limiting fish consumption to no more than twice a week. They also advise pregnant women and children, elderly, with those health concerns to also avoid eating fish that are typically high in mercury content. Fish like swordfish and shark and tilefish and king mackerel and so forth. And what baffles me is that the same FDA that is so concerned about people eating fish because of its mercury toxicity has very little to say about the vaccines that we push on young people and elderly. Another common and overlooked source of mercury toxicity is dental amalgams, those silver fillings in our mouths, okay? These should be removed by a trained biological dentist who specializes in this procedure. But again, there's not a whole lot of talk on that, which I just don't understand. So again, mercury is contained in various vaccines. It's important to be aware of in ingredients. Vaccines also cause a lot of other risks, so it's important to know the risks and the benefits of vaccines before ever considering pulling up your shirt and getting a jab. Okay. Here's a test I ran on a patient and what his test results look like. And one of the things that you can notice is that his arsenic levels and his cadmium levels were off the chart. Okay, this is an important thing to consider when we have brain fog. Okay, number 6, number 7, and 8 all relate to things like gut infections, leaky gut, and sensitivity to grains. Okay, now another common area that I suspect when a patient complains of brain fog and anxiety and depression is tied into problems connected with the gut. This can be things like a parasite. This can be a bacterial infection. It can be yeast overgrowth, like candida. It could be coming from a grain sensitivity. It could be coming from a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Grains, which I just mentioned a few moments ago. Eating grains affects the brain in many ways. Just like refined sugar, grains can cause inflammation in your body. They can cause inflammation in the brain. There's a great book by David Perlmutter titled Grain Brain. Okay, it documents the effects that gluten and many of these other grains have on the brain. It documents the effects that these grains have on the brain and how consuming these grains is linked to fatigue. It's linked to brain fog. It's linked to anxiety. There's studies that show that eating these grains can also be linked to schizophrenia and many other psychiatric problems. Okay, so when it comes to infections, candida overgrowth, biotoxins made by bacteria, this can also be a major problem and driving factor for inflammation in the brain. These biotoxins act as poisons to the nerve system, brain and spinal cord, and again can cause brain fog. One of the questions I would ask you is that when you eat sugars, starches, carbohydrates, do your symptoms get worse? Because if you do notice more brain fog, if you do have bloating in your stomach, there's a very strong connection that some of the brain fog that you're experiencing, the psychiatric issues you may be struggling with, the depression, might be stemming from your gut. Okay, so again, if you notice this connection, you probably have some sort of leaky gut, some sort of infection, perhaps a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You can see in this journal here from Neuroendocrinology that a leaky gut is associated with depression and that gluten sensitivity is associated with psychiatric disorders. Okay, so again, we have to look at the big picture here. Now, the 9th cause of why you may be suffering from brain fog is one that should be obvious: nutritional deficiencies. Now, most of us are aware of the important macronutrients that provide us with the calories and the building blocks for our bodies, the carbohydrates, the fats, and the proteins. But many of us are not aware of the micronutrient deficiencies that are also critical to our body's functioning. These are needed in smaller quantities than macronutrients, but again, they're extremely important. These are your minerals. These are your amino acids. These are your trace minerals, your vitamins. Okay, now if you eat a diet of high quality, nutrient dense whole foods, we can obtain many of these micronutrients. In America, we're all a well-fed country, plenty of macronutrients, but often what we see is we're undernourished, right? We don't have enough micronutrients. And if we don't have enough micronutrients, our bodies don't function well. For example, if we're deficient in B vitamins, our brain can often exhibit irritability, confusion, lethargy, all the things that can sometimes mimic Alzheimer's disease. And identifying, correcting these nutrient deficiencies can often resolve these problems very easily. Okay? Now, the last one that we want to talk today about is anemia. Okay? Anemia affects the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cell. Anemia is usually defined as a decrease in the amount of red blood cells or the amount of hemoglobin found in your blood. Symptoms of anemia are often vague, but they include things like feeling tired and having weakness, shortness of breath, poor ability to exercise, heart palpitations, feeling like one's going to pass out, increased thirst. Okay? So to wrap things up here, as you know, brain fog can be caused by many things. Okay? You don't need to continue allowing your brain to further deteriorate. Today's video obviously was my top 10 causes of fatigue that I see most often in my practice. And there are other causes that I just didn't obviously have time to get into today. But I think the topic of hormone health is also a huge area for men and women who suffer with brain fog and fatigue, and the same with thyroid health. I've also done many videos specifically about thyroid and sex hormones, so I didn't really want to obviously cover those in today's video, but I also didn't want to leave those out. The other thing is when it comes to correcting brain fog, I encourage you to work with a holistic functional medicine physician who will really take the time, who will investigate these causes. And most importantly, they will help you get your life back, okay? So just make sure whoever it is that you work with, they teach you about the dietary changes that you're going to need to make. Don't continue working with a physician if they don't talk to you about dietary changes. Last thing, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know we hit on a lot of different things, and should you have questions, say, about perhaps becoming a patient of our office, I'd encourage you to visit our website, fill out a contact us form. Lastly, if you like this video, you enjoyed it, share it with your friends. There's a lot of people out there that are experiencing brain fog and fatigue and depression. They're being over-medicated when they shouldn't be, and there are natural ways to go about regaining brain health, okay? So until next time, take care.